How's it going everyone, this is MindBlank, welcome back to my channel, and building a budget PC this year was a very hard task. Between jacked up prices for GPUs and RAM modules and lack of availability for some good budget CPUs like the Pentium G4560, putting together a nice and expensive system was a challenge to say the least. Despite this, today I'm building someone's first PC, my best around $500 system that you can build new at the end of 2017. This is meant for 1080p entry-level gaming and is powered by the new Athlon X4 950. Although running on the new AM4 platform, this is still bulldozer or rather excavator based. Running 4 cores clocked at 3.5 GHz base frequency is the best you can get from AMD at the $60 price tag. To answer the question that is on most people's lips right now, why not a Pentium G4560 based build? Well, the answer is rather easy. AM4 is a living platform with presumed support for this decade at least. LGA 1151 version 1 is end of life EOL with Kaby Lake, so the best CPU you can get on that platform is an i7 7700K, which has already been superseded by the 8700K. I'll be building everything in the Deepcool Earlkase, a $50 chassis that is the component I am the happiest about in this build. Why? Well, you get a tempered glass side panel, a PSU shroud, absolutely great build quality, a magnetic top air filter and an RGB strip. This awesome front panel is made out of metal with a very interesting looking and feeling texture. Honestly here, I love this little case and would have no issues in housing even a $1000 system in it. Like I said in my Deepcool Captain 240EX RGB review, this company continues to surprise me with their great price to performance ratio products. They're like the honest John of PC components and I ended up loving the Earlkase enclosure. This PC needs to give a very easy upgrade path, so I felt M4 with a B350 chipset was the right option in this case. I did want to ensure that the motherboard is well prepared for future upgrades while still being a good budget option, so I went with what I think is the most overlooked M4 budget board, the MSI B350 PC Mate. First off, this is a great looking all black board, which is rather hard to find nowadays. MSI do kinda market it as a business oriented board, but in reality there's nothing that could dismiss this as a solid pick for a budget gaming PC. You have the choice of a lower priced Micro ATX A320 based chipset board, but for me it wasn't the right choice for this upgrade ready build. At $80 or even less for a full ATX board, I bet you'd expect this to be all low price, no dice, but in reality it's really not bad. Aside from the looks, you get a decent 4+2 phase VRM with beefy heatsinks, a PCIe 3rd gen which will run at 8x with this Athlon, not 16, an additional 2nd gen PCIe, USB 3.1 Gen 1, USB-C at the back, and an M.2 port. On this particular configuration with the MSI board, the CPU, the Athlon X4 950, is not overclockable. If you want to overclock the CPU, at least at this point in time, you need an Asus board. RAM prices are absurdly high and still rising, so this puts you in a position where 8GB represent 20% of the total build. As such, I couldn't squeeze in 16GB worth of memory. Currently not a big issue for 1080p high settings, but costs definitely mess with your budget. Bristol Ridge, meaning this Athlon X4, is using DDR4, but don't expect to see 2933 MHz and upwards like you do on Ryzen. I did find a good offer for this used HyperX Savage 2666 MHz CL13, which, while it didn't allow me to boot at even 2400 MHz on this CPU, I got an awesome 2133 MHz CL11 low latency setup. Even at 2666 MHz, this is pretty low latency for this speed, so it will play very nice with the future Ryzen upgrade. I also couldn't squeeze in an SSD in this budget due to rising prices, but it's not all bad since I have a Seagate 1TB hard drive. This particular model is fairly quick, averaging more than 160 MB per second, reads and writes, so it's definitely no slouch. Now thank God PSU prices are decent and you can find a good budget PSU from most manufacturers that hovers around $30 to $40. This 500 watt PSU was provided by Deepcool and has okay voltage regulation, good ripple suppression and an 80 plus rating. It's also very quiet at this system's less than 200 watt power draw. Finally, to spruce things up a bit, I used a Wraith stealth cooler from a Ryzen 3 CPU, simply for looks, and 3 RGB fans, again from Deepcool. This is a 3-fan package they sell for around $50 and is not included in the build price since it's a matter of personal preference and of course has zero impact on performance. You can hook them up to the RGB port on the motherboard or use the provided wired remote to change modes and brightness. To power the needs of 1080p medium to high settings, I've opted for the GTX 1050 2GB, the MSI Gaming X. The cooling solution is overkill and looks alone won't justify the extra box on this model for most of you, but sales can be found for $20 to $25 less than MSI's MSRP. That's how I got it actually. The limited 2GB option is definitely a negative here, limiting you to medium texture settings in today's games at best. The Ti model comes with 4GB VRAM and is faster indeed, but you'll fork over $50 to $60 extra for that performance difference. This card is a great 1080p option from Nvidia, and you can also look at some Radeon RX 560s, which while being a little slower overall, have the benefit of FreeSync without spending more on a monitor than on your entire system. Right, so this is how the build looks, mighty fine if you ask me, thanks to the great looking case, motherboard, fans of course, and GPU. But what about performance? What can we expect from this PC? Specifically for this build, I'm going to move away from the graph tests with 0.1 and 1% lows and just show you some performance stats with a very powerful afterburner overlay. I'll also talk about in-game settings used, but I don't feel this is a build where I should be closely looking at frame times, 0.1% lows and such. This is someone's first PC after all. I will also mention that footage is recorded with Shadowplay, not a capture card, so it's eating around 3 FPS on average. Usually this is not a big deal, but at this level of performance, it matters. So I'll kick it off with GTA 5, still the reason why most people want to get into PC gaming in the first place. And I'm using a blend of medium to high settings like I will be using for all my tested games. I did drop population and draw distance to medium in order to take the load off the CPU, but as you can see, usage is pegged at 100% in the city areas. It only starts to drop in the surrounding zones where you get smooth frame times as well. But all in all, it looks great and is definitely playable, so I'll take this as a definite pass. I put Witcher 3 in here for anyone interested in open world RPGs. This is still very demanding and very pretty. Despite this, it did allow me the same blend of medium to high settings while providing around 40-50 FPS in areas outside cities. Like with GTA 5 however, going anywhere near a location that requires large amounts of CPU resources will peg the Athlon to 100% and GPU usage starts dropping, so in fact, there's still some room left in the 1050 with a faster CPU. For this game, the 2GB VRAM were again a limitation, even though Witcher 3 isn't exactly known for high VRAM demands. Next up is Call of Duty World War II, which provides very playable frame rates for 1080p and the same medium to high mix of settings. There's areas that look a little washed out due to the VRAM limitation and lower than high textures, but all in all we are looking at above 45 FPS gaming generally and looks great during gameplay, not only cutscenes, and can easily be enjoyed on this system. Obviously it's pushing both the CPU and GPU, but CPU limited scenarios are less common than in the previous two titles. Overwatch, an easy to get into game, is apparently not very demanding, but this is where you'd be wrong. Don't expect to crank everything up on the GTX 1050. In fact, I'm running high settings here, while there's 2 more options above it. However, this provides very nice visuals and performance. I'd have no issue in playing this for fun with friends or even ranked on a quality low latency monitor. Still, the only issue is that textures are a little washed out due to that pesky 2GB buffer. Lastly, Wolfenstein 2 is the only title here that made me drop settings to a clear medium. High in this game is equivalent to that, so don't be fooled. Performance, however, is kinda wonky, with the 1050 dropping the ball in some areas with 30 FPS or even lower dips, and areas with a relatively smooth 40 FPS and above. Still though, this game is a looker and it does have high requirements. From all these games, I was expecting Wolfenstein to have the most trouble with washed out textures, but on the contrary, it's the title that suffers the least apparently. Alrighty, so you can also overclock the GTX 1050 for a little extra boost. I can 100% stable only drive 200 MHz extra on the core, getting me 1950 MHz under load. VRAM, however, is insane and maxes out my slider in Afterburner at plus 1000 MHz. This alone nets you the same boost as 200 to 250 MHz extra on the core. Core and VRAM OC provides around 20% performance uplift, which is rather massive. Temperatures are still great, so I'd have no issue in running this OC on a 24/7 basis. Like I mentioned, the CPU can't be overclocked on this board, so we're stuck with 200 MHz extra boost under load, bringing it to 3.7 GHz. I am 100% confident that the 2133 MHz CL11 RAM is helping out a ton though. Guys and gals, your thoughts, let me see them down below, how you'd improve this build in the same budget. One option is to drop the easy upgrade path I've built in here, meaning getting a cheaper A320 board, cheaper 2133 MHz CL15 RAM, get a case that comes with a PSU, although I wholeheartedly don't recommend this, and I think you can squeeze in a GTX 1050 Ti in here and maybe even a Ryzen 3. Anyway, leave me your comments down below on that as well, and thank you for supporting this channel by subscribing, and also don't forget to check out my Twitter and Patreon pages linked in the description if you'd like to further support MindBlank Tech's growth. See you in the next one everybody, bye bye.